Let me begin by asking this question: who sees under the floorboards? I came across a story. I was reading this story. A young man by the age of 30 came to a foreign land to work as an electrician. And as an electrician, an electrical engineer, he was involved in laying all the electrical wires and so on and so forth. After 2 to 3 weeks, his boss called him to his office. And to his surprise, his boss scolded him and accused him of being lazy. And he was like surprised. And he said, I can't believe, I don't accept that you're accusing me. I'm lazy. I'm not lazy, sir. But the boss said, look at your other team. They have done more compared to you. They have laid out electrical wires and they have completed houses more than you. Why is that? And he said, no, sir, please don't get me wrong. I'm not lazy. I'm just very careful in laying the wires as prescribed by the regulation of our community and the city based on fire hazard. I'm very careful, sir. I'm trying to be, the intricacy of the laying out of the wires and so on and so forth. He was explaining that. And his boss said, who sees under the floorboards? Why do you have to pay attention very carefully in laying, or why do you have to be very careful? Who sees under the floorboards? Our main thing is to have more houses so that we can earn more and more money and more revenue into the company. But he said, who sees under the floorboards? And this young man responded by saying, my God sees. You know the story? He was fired by his boss. But for that man, the ethics of his work, that he would do everything in a proper way, and he would not cheat, and he would not shortcut what is supposed to be done, because in his heart, he knows that someone there is looking at him. So the title of our conversation, if you may allow me, is Being Watched. Something that we will learn in the chapter, in the third part of the series on Throne to the Throne. This is something that we will draw and learn, that we are, you and me, wherever we are, not just in the church, not just in the home, not just in the workplace, we are being watched. Genesis 39, verses 1 to 3. Some of you probably, Pastor, what about 38? I will skip 38 because it's the story of Judah. And later on, we'll look back to it, but I will not dwell so much on 38. Let's focus on Joseph. So chapter 39, 1 to 23. Because the turmoil and the chaos in the family, where did we leave the scene last week? There was trouble in the family because when they give the report to Jacob that your son was devoured by a ferocious animal, so on and so forth, there was no peace in the family. There was trouble. There was no more joy. It was gloomy in the family. And that's why chapter 38, Judah left home and went somewhere. So when I was studying chapter 39, I was just digging, and I was imagining sitting across Joseph again on the table and said, Joseph, what can we learn from the episode in chapter 39? And this is what I have learned that I want you to bring home today and that we will cherish for the rest of our life. That let's remember this lesson. Let's remember this insight. I will keep my guard. There's a saying, you lost your guard. Keep your guard. You don't only keep your guard in times of testing. You keep your guard even in times of blessing. And we will see how Joseph maintained his guard, his poise, his faith, his conviction, his public witness. Not only in times of prosperity and favor, not only in times of favor and success, Joseph kept his guard even in times of testing. Interesting. I will keep my guard because I answered to God. Why? Because He is watching me. It will save our marriage, your career, your life, and your testimony in the Lord. Because if you lose your guard, not only in good times and in bad times, we forget that we answer to God. Joseph, in all the series that we will do, he would always think, I am answerable to God. I will give my answer to God so that I will be careful with my life because I am being watched. Verse 1. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. That's the sequel now. The connection from verse 37, chapter 37, last verse. Joseph had reached Egypt, had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, look at this. An Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. Pay attention to that because later on you will see that again, the description. The captain of the guard bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. Now, God's providence was at work. No matter the evil and the sin and the intention, bad intention of his brothers, God's plan and providence was working. And here comes Pharaoh. He could have been sold to a very rich businessman in Egypt. And yet Pharaoh, the official, not just an official, the captain of the guard, was right there at the right time and bought Joseph because God's plan is at work. Now, next verse, the Lord was with Joseph. Look at the summary here of the narrator. Very interesting. This is repeated 7 times in the entire chapter. Many, many times in the entire, all scriptures in the Old Testament, the Lord was with Joseph. Just as the description, the Lord was with Daniel, the Lord was with Enoch, the Lord was with Noah, and so on and so forth. But here in chapter 39, 7 times, this is a key phrase, because the key to success is the favor of God. The Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered. Now, look at that. And he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. Now, Joseph now is brought and living in a polytheistic environment. Yeah. Sometimes we say, it's easy to live, the Lord is with me if we are surrounded by fellow believers. But if you're living alone, abroad, in a polytheistic society, in a world that is ungodly, in a world that worship idols, in a world that does not recognize Christ, how do you live and keep the favor of the Lord in your life? Here's Joseph, surrounded with people who does not know God, worship many, many gods, and yet Joseph prospered simply because God, the Lord, was with Joseph. I was wondering, did Joseph know that the Lord was with him? Did Joseph visibly, or did he experience it in his life? Later on, you hold on to the thought. Did he really sense it, that the Lord was with him? Or just the narrator is telling us, watch Joseph, because the Lord was with him. Look at the result, but the Lord is with you. Look at the prosperity and the success given to Joseph. And he lived in the house even of an unbelieving master. Now, listen very carefully before we continue. Sometimes we have this wrong notion. Sana, my employer is a Christian. I hope the company that I will join is a Christian. I hope that the school that I will go is a Christian. I hope that the university that I will attend is a Christian. It doesn't matter. Joseph can live a faithful life even in the midst of an ungodly world. The reason why we are there, we are where we are, is that we may bear witness. Sometimes we have this wrong notion. Sana Christian, para pag Christian maayos lahat. Not necessarily. Sometimes mahirap pa nga di ba? If we claim to be Christian and then we do not measure to the standard of God's morality and righteousness, then everybody suffers, those with the same faith. God can prosper you and me wherever we are, regardless of our environment. Take note of that. Okay? The Lord was with Joseph and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. Look at this verse. When his master, Potiphar, when his master saw, now this is not an overnight thing, this is not a one-day thing. How did he know the Lord? Maybe there was an interview, maybe there was the sharing or conversation somehow that Joseph said, no, I believe in the Lord. And how? When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes. Look at the progression here. The master saw that God was with Joseph, and the presence of God in Joseph is the key to his success, his faithfulness, the prosperity. Therefore, Joseph found favor in the eyes of his employer and became his attendant. So there was a promotion right away. You know, if you're a slave, you can be assigned in the field or in the house. You are a field slave. You're in the cornfield or in the rice field, or you're assigned there, or you are a house slave. In the process of the development of his employment, there was this initial promotion for Joseph because he was faithful and doing successful, and he saw something in the life of Joseph in his service. He became his attendant. When Potiphar saw that the Lord was with him, what did he really mean? Potiphar saw the quality of Joseph's demeanor. Joseph was not, time to clean the floor. So, sir, hold on for a while. I'm still having my devotion. I'm still praying. Is that the way Potiphar saw that the Lord was with Joseph? Again, I will tell you something about my professor that really struck me. This professor of mine in the seminary, we right away judged him because we were queuing in the canteen to eat our lunch. And our professor sat down and started enjoying his food. So all of us were looking at him. Right after eating, we approached him, "Sir, we noticed you did not pray." And he smiled at us. "How did you know?" While I was queuing up, I was already thanking the Lord. "Thank you, Lord, for the apritada." In his heart, he was already praying. Oh, wow. So the quality of Joseph's demeanor, his behavior is different. He was not imposing his faith. There was no bitterness. There was no resentments in the life of Joseph. Even though he was not a slave, born a slave, he belonged to a wealthy family of Jacob, a prominent family. And yet Joseph found himself as a slave, no rights, no opinion, no anything, and yet he was pleasant. Be careful of our demeanor. Because people are watching us the way we conduct ourselves in the office or in the workplace. Yan ba yung Kristiyano? Murmur ng murmur? And then we call ourselves, we go to church every Sunday, and our employers would see our demeanor is not parallel to what we are confessing as Christians, then we have problem. Look at Joseph. He was faithful. When he was sent to the market with $50, he gives the exact change. He does not pocket some change. Be careful. You clock yourself on time. When you're given a work, you work properly, give your best. And there is pleasantness in your face, in your behavior, in your demeanor. You're trustworthy. There's something in you. I never seen your face frown or murmur or negativity or anything. I have always seen you pleasant, and your work ethics is so good. Maybe in that way they will see that Joseph is so different from the rest of the slaves. Potiphar took notice that the Lord was with Joseph. Faithful, dependable, and trustworthy. How is our work ethics, mga kapatid? How are you behaving in school? You don't show that the Lord is with you by being like the Pharisees, that they walk so they don't associate with people who are sinful and sinners. And no. The best way to show that the Lord is with us is with the proper and good behavior. Even if you don't say you're a Christian, but they can see in your countenance, you're so pleasant. We enjoy your company. You are inspiring. You are like the light of the group, the life of the group. And your demeanor is contagious. Proper, nice. You behave so well. Potiphar saw that Joseph was faithful. Joseph's behavior showed that he did his work not simply to Potiphar, for his employer, but ultimately for the Lord, because Joseph saw, I am being watched. I will keep my guard because I answer to God. Apostle Paul from the New Testament shouting to us in the Old Testament while we're reading Genesis, work willingly. In Colossians, he was telling all the congregation in Colossae, both free men and slaves, work willingly at whatever you do, as though you were working for the Lord. Okay, this is applicable for us, as an employee, as a servant, whatever we do. Work willingly. Huwag na magdabog. Sisters who are working at home, mga kapatid natin, hindi na dadaan sa dabog yan. Simply because our employer did not give us a raise or an ampao during this Chinese New Year, and we cook the chicken rice like duck rice. Hilaw yung chicken. Hilaw yung rice. Buti nga sa kanila. Hallelujah. We're not grateful for the job that we have. We have to be grateful. Maybe Joseph was demonstrating that. So work willingly. Paul said, as for the Lord rather than for people. Look at that. Remember that the Lord will give you an inheritance as your reward, and that the master you are serving is Christ. Continue. Potiphar, as a result, that Joseph was faithful, dependable, grateful, pleasant, so on and so forth. As a result, Potiphar, his boss, put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. Now, from being a house or field slave to his attendant, his assistant, now, grabe, no? Kita ni Potiphar, among his hundreds of slaves, there's something different with this boy. You know, when God's favor rests upon us, and our employer saw that. We have one member before. She's a helper in the house many years ago. She would attend our church in Lavender. You know what? Riding a Jaguar. Because her boss, her employer said, use the Jaguar, go to church, what? We alighted from a taxi, and I saw this Jaguar parking, and I look at it, and it, Pastor Butch. I was really shocked, and then, she said, see, my boss let me use his Jaguar. Before you park, can we just go one round? That was my first time to ride a Jaguar. You see that? Joseph was promoted to be the manager. Joseph was keeping his guard, even in times of blessing. So from that time, look at this. The narrator is saying, from that time he put him in charge. From that time he put him in charge of his household. The Lord blessed the house of Potiphar, or the household of the Egyptian. Look at this reason, the narrator. Siguro when the narrator was writing it, he was smiling, the Lord was with Joseph. And from the time he was put in charge, the Lord was blessing this Egyptian household because of Joseph. When we behave and we keep our guard in the Lord, little did we realize we become a channel of blessing to our employers, our company, no matter how not perfect they are. Maybe you're in charge of a department, and yet your department is flying so high. All the projects and all the transactions are doing well in spite of the economic downturn. Very obviously, because of Joseph, the blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. For me, God was training Joseph here because in a little did Joseph realize that from that small scale, from that micro level, God would elevate him to a macro level where he can manage the entire Egypt someday. Little did he realize that. But because he was faithful, dependable in small things, look at the principle of Jesus. When we are faithful in small things, God will promote us to bigger things. So, he left. I really like this. The narrator said, because everything is doing well, the investment of Potiphar is doing well, everything is okay. So, he left in Joseph's care everything he had. You know that the meaning of this? He abandoned everything. Pinagkatiwala na kay Joseph. Wala na siyang iniintindi. In other words, he gave it in full as if Potiphar is now just enjoying his retirement and everything. He was so relieved of everything. He does not worry of anything. So he left. The word left is a play of words later on. That word again will be used in a different way in the story. So he left to Joseph's care everything he had. With Joseph in charge, look at the peace of mind of Potiphar. Knowing Joseph is in charge, I have peace, I can sleep well, I can do other better things. He did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. If you have a business and if you have a good manager, reliable, dependable, who would lay all the wires the proper way and would not cheat the requirements of the regulations of the society, you have peace of mind because you know that your work is done in the proper way. Now Joseph, here's the problem. Here's the in-between. The in-between is now the trial. Now, Joseph was well built. Can you imagine? I would imagine Joseph after doing his chores, he would go to the gym and well built. There's only two people who was described this way. His mother Rachel and him with a good and pleasant appearance, and Joseph well built. Tama yung legs, maganda, proportionado, well built and handsome. That's the problem of Joseph. After a while, his master's wife took notice. Just like Potiphar, noticed his faithfulness, his demeanor, his behavior on the other side of the room. The wife, the Jezebel type of wife, Potiphar's wife, was noticing something else. The bicep, the tricep, and the leg muscle of Joseph was noticed by other translation, medyo parental guidance eh. And the master's wife took lustfully on Joseph. Took notice of Joseph in the lustful way. This woman, from the background of the story, will know that she is not an ordinary woman. She's a very scheming woman. Look at this, how outforward she is. Joseph, come to bed with me. Straight. Come to bed with me, Joseph. Look at here. Pay attention very carefully. We will all learn something here. But he refused. Ma'am, no, ma'am. No. With me in charge. He told her, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house or in the field. Everything he owns, he entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house. Look at the litany of Joseph. Si Joseph, ang dami pa sinasabi, no? Look, no one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you. Why, ma'am? You know why? Because you are his wife. And look at the last line. First time, Joseph would confess his faith in God. Joseph did not forget what God has done to him. I was favored. I was used to be a field slave. I became an attendant in the house. Now I am a manager. All these blessings and favor from God that I am enjoying. He does not forget where he was standing and all the favor of God. And then he said, how then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? Wow. Now Joseph, the lesson that we're learning, I will keep my guard because I answer to God. Ooh. Pause for a while. We heard so many stories of affairs, scandals, immoral things that happens in our society. May God have mercy on us to always remember to keep our guard because we answer to God. Many people would look at the story and say, why not, Joseph? Why not? Joseph, how old are you by this time? 17, maybe your 20s? You have no girlfriend, Joseph? You're far from home. You're lonely. And here's a beautiful wife of Potiphar attracted to you. Maybe other people would argue and say, why not, Joseph? Why not keep it a secret? Why, become like my brothers who would carry the guilt for the rest of their lives of something that they have done? Joseph was sober. Very, very sober. How could I do such a wicked thing? Look at that. He called it a wicked thing. And sin against my God. And look at this. And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, it was not only a one-time temptation. Every day. Paggising ni Joseph in the morning, as he would manage the properties and the household of Potiphar, and the wife will always say to him, Joseph, come to bed with me. Look at how Joseph reacted. We can learn from here. He refused to go to bed day after day. He refused to go to bed with him, and yet he did another step forward, or even to be with her. Joseph would not allow himself to be alone in the elevator with Potiphar's wife. Just go ahead, ma'am. I'll just follow, ma'am. I'll just take the stairs. He would not allow to be alone in the room, in the living room. He would not even to be with her. Sometimes we play around with temptations and with fire. We'll get burned. I heard this story many years ago from a pastor who was visiting Bicol. This man, he was walking home. His path, his route from his office to his house, he would always pass by a nightclub. People there luring them, come, just for a small amount of money. The sound and the lights and everything. And this guy's weakness, he used to be going to that place many, many years ago, but he tried to change. But this guy became a Christian, and he would go home and he would pass this place and he would look at the store or that club, and as if he was being magneted by the club and all the music. And did you miss it? Come. This man, although this is the shortest distance to his house, he would not pass that road. He would deliberately walk around the subdivision. It takes an hour maybe or more to reach his house than 5 minutes and pass by that temptation every day. That's wisdom. Hindi, kaya ko yan. Kaya ko yan. Nadama-magnet ka eh. But this guy, no. This guy would say, it's okay, I'll walk an hour to get to my house than the 5 minutes here. Anyway, it's okay, 10,000 steps yan. As long as I am free from temptation. Look at Joseph. He did not only say, no, ma'am, no, ma'am, every day, no, ma'am, no. He even refused to be with her. Maybe this is something that we need to do. If we know our temptation or weakness, If that place is your weakness, if that thing is our weakness, don't even have those things. Get out. Tama si Paul eh. You don't fight and wrestle with temptation. You run away. You flee. That's what Paul said to Timothy. Look, one day, persistent si Potiphar. Joseph, look, come to bed with me, Joseph. Every day, no, ma'am, no, and he would really deliberately get away of the path. They would not cross together, but one day, the narrator said, one day, he went into the house to attend to his duty because he was the manager, ding, ding, and none of the household servants was inside. No, this is not an accident. Potiphar's wife was so evil that he told probably his servants, tomorrow is your day off, every one of you, out of my house. So that when Joseph woke up, when he entered the house, it was so quiet, and all of a sudden he heard, boom, nagsarado yung pinto. And Potiphar was at the door. I can imagine, Joseph's heart was almost exploding. And then Potiphar tried. Look at this. She caught him by his cloak and said, come to bed with me. Talagang persahan na. But he ran away. He left his cloak. Galing ni Joseph. Kailangan marunong tayo maghubad ng Amerikana, ng ating mga polo and everything. It's okay. It's okay to run naked outside than to put shame into our lives for the rest of our lives. So he left his cloak in her hand. Sa'yo na yan, ma'am. And he ran out of the house. If the door was closed, probably Joseph jumped out of the window if it's necessary. While I was reading this, I highlighted the word cloak. In other translation, his robe. Walang swerte si Joseph sa robe. Again, I was stripped of my robe. The first time I was stripped of my robe by my own brothers, I was sold to slavery. And ikaw, ma'am, another robe. I don't like to have this robe anymore. And he ran out of the house. That's right. Little did Joseph realize that Paul would write that to Timothy. Flee from immorality, Timothy. Run! The best way to overcome it is to run away. Kung merong isang tukso sa buhay nyo na nakikita nyo lagi, pag nakita nyo, takbo na. Bakit ka lagi tumatakbo sa akin, brother? Run. Run out of the house. No, the next verses are mga litanya to ni Potiphar, but let me go through it faster. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house, she was really prostrated. She called her household servants. She said to them, pay attention carefully. The term Hebrew is first time used. Look, this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. In Tagalog, paglaruan tayo. Tama ka na siguro yung translation. No? He was sent to us para paglaruan tayo, sport. No? Okay yung translation. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. Binaliktad ni Potiphar. And all the servants, all the servants were wondering. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak, his robe, beside me and ran out of the house. Diyan, tama siya. A little bit half-truth. She kept it. Ito talaga si Potiphar's wife, no? She kept the robe of, Gi-emote siya. She kept his cloak beside her until his master, Potiphar, came home. Then she told him this story. I want you to pay attention to the version of Potiphar's wife. Look, pay attention to the version. He was now talking to, why are you crying, honey? And then when he reached the room, his wife and his loving wife was crying and probably, what's wrong, honey? The Hebrew, look at this. The Hebrew. He called Joseph the Hebrew. Now, it gives us a glimpse that Joseph was telling the story of his background. My great-grandfather Abraham, the Hebrew, they were called Hebrew. So he was telling all this story. The Hebrew slave, look at the way Potiphar's wife was saying. The Hebrew slave that you brought us came to me to make sport with me. Now, pay attention carefully. The wife now is blaming Potiphar. Ikaw ang may kasalanan yan eh. The slave that you brought to us, who's responsible for everything, not me? You, Potiphar. The Hebrew slave you brought us came to me and make sport of me, but as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. When his master, look at this, heard the story. His wife told him, saying, this is how your slave treated me, this is how your slave treated me. He burned with anger. Now, the narrator did not say, galit na galit si Potiphar. I don't know if he punched the wall, he kicked the bed, or he overturned the table, whatever. He was burning with anger, period. He did not tell us whether he was angry at at his wife, or Joseph. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. Now here's the glimpse, the clue. Potiphar knew the reputation of his wife. First of all, there was no witness. Second of all, he was being blamed. Now, this is not the first time that happened. This is not the first time that happened to his wife. The third thing is, I believe that he was angry at his wife because that kind of case, adultery or abuse or whatever, sexual immorality or whatever, in Egypt is punishable by death. Potiphar, if he really believed that Joseph was guilty, he could have sentenced him to death. And yet, Potiphar did not sentence Joseph to death. Instead, put him in prison. I want you to take note of this. Many of us have read the story, but we have missed this. He was not sent to a municipal jail or to a provincial jail. He was placed in a special jail. Look. Later on, there's another clue. He was placed where the king's prisoner, ito yung mga bilangguan ng mga dignitaries, diplomats. It's not really a bad prison. It is really a place for offending officials, government officials. Intervention of God. Again, God is moving. Why? Later on, we'll find out. And next week, we'll find out why. Because God is preparing something. So He put him in the king's prisoner. The king's prisoners were confined. Look at this, my realization. Joseph may have lost his robe or his job, but he retained his dignity and integrity. Mga kapatid, there will come a time in our we choose. Because many people today, in the case of Joseph, in the place of Joseph, would have given in to the temptation. And when no one knows we're abroad, no one sees us abroad, it's okay, we do all these things. But you know, that if we know that we have to keep our guard because we answer to God, Joseph, it's okay to lose my robe or even my job as long as I retain my faith, my public witness, my integrity, and my dignity. Let us not exchange this. Sometimes we let go of our integrity and dignity and went to the other way and keep a secret and a sinful life. The temptations are left and right. Joseph demonstrated a very, very good example. The last paragraph of chapter 39, return to the Lord is with Joseph. Sandwiched in between is Potiphar's wife scheming. But look again how the narrator ended chapter 39. But while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. Wow! And He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. This same thing, how Joseph behaved when he was a field slave, a house slave, that the manager, Potiphar, took notice of his demeanor and his behavior, his loyalty, his pleasantness, his gratefulness, his behavior. The same thing. The warden, the one in charge, look at Joseph, took notice of his behavior. Why? The common denominator is, the only thing that is constant is the Lord was with him. I wonder if Joseph sensed that. When he was thrown in prison and he was just there at the corner and not doing anything, not eating. Why are you not eating? I don't want to eat. I want to die. I don't like my high. I hate my life. Why? Because I did not do anything. I was unjustly accused. No. Joseph was not bitter. It's not the place. It's his heart. So the warden, as a result of God's favor, kindness, hesed, the loving kindness of God, as the result, the warden put Joseph, just like Potiphar, in charge. This happened already. Don't be afraid. If someday you lose your job in Singapore and you are going back to Philippines or somewhere, don't be afraid, because the God who is able to bless you here will be with you wherever you go. It's not the place. The sun that rises in Singapore and sets here is the same sun that rises in the field. Don't be afraid na sometimes nagunaw na ang mundo ko, pastor, nawala na ako ng trabaho, may employment pass, may dependent pass, may permanent pass, is that approved? I'm going, oh, wala na. Lord, why did you abandon me? No. God is not abandoning you. You'll be surprised. You'll thank Him if you're founded in the right foundation. You'll not be shaken. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. Can you imagine? But he's really good in his management level, in his leadership. Look at the leadership quality of Joseph and how he managed the small things, the field and everything, the house. Now he's managing prison. And last verse. The warden paid no attention to anything. Kagaya ni Potiphar. Left everything. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care. Why? Because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. Joseph, regardless whether I'm in Canaan, I'm in Egypt, in the prison, look at the demeanor of Joseph. I wonder if he sensed God was with him. Yes, probably. That everything he touches blooms and prospers. How are we as a student? Are you studying hard? You're doing well? Paying attention, diligent in what you are supposed to do as a student? As an employee, are you faithful? Will they see the Lord is with us with the way that we are dependable, trustworthy? Are we bitter? Does our employer hear our ranting? Lagi na lang tayong negative. Bad stories left and right. No pleasant thing, no good things. Who sees under the floorboards? Wala naman si ma'am, wala si sir. I can just do whatever I want. They're on holiday, Chinese New Year eh. But who sees under the floorboards? God sees. Remember that engineer? The story did not end there. His boss realized he was fired as an electrical engineer because he would faithfully do the wiring and everything. And all of a sudden, his boss realized that was actually an asset. His integrity and his character is an asset. So he recalled him and put him as in the accounting firm and as a cashier to handle the cash because he knows that he will not swindle. That's a good thing. Oh, I like your quality. Look at Paul. Let's end with Paul in the New Testament for all of us. Slaves, servants, employees. Look at the way Paul would instruct us today, followers of Christ. Slaves, servants, employee, whatever. Obey your earthly masters. That's work ethics. With respect and fear. Huwag naman nating i-chismis yung ating employer. We're not grateful that they are being used by God to provide for us. Obey your earthly masters with respect and fear and with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ. Look at Paul. Why? Because we're answerable to God. Joseph ultimately was demonstrating his work ethics, his faithfulness, his demeanor towards God. And Paul continued, obey him, obey them. Not only to win their favor. Masipag tayo, end of the year, because of the bonus or Chinese New Year, masipag tayo. Not only to win their favor when their eye is on you, but like slaves, servants, employee, manager, doing the will of God from your heart with willingness. And Paul continues saying, serve with all your heart as if you were serving the Lord, ultimately God, not men, because you know that the Lord will reward everyone for whatever good he does, whether he is a slave or free. This is powerful. And again, Colossians, Paul, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord. Can you imagine wherever we are, if you're a teacher, if you're a nurse, you're a project manager, you're doing it perfectly because you know the Lord is watching you. You're doing it for God, not only for your boss, doing the right thing. Not for men, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. Mga kapatid, pag ang Diyos nag-reward, may kasabihan tayo, if it rains, it pours, di ba? Pag ang Diyos nag-reward, wala kang lalagyan to contain it. Remember, we are being watched. by God and by other people. Here's your takeaway. I will keep my guard because I answer to God. How powerful is this in the life of Joseph? If you and I imagine, if we will always remember this and apply this in our hearts and in our lives. Every time we go to office in the morning, I will keep my guard because I answer to God ultimately. Then you will be sober in any attempts, blessing or curse or temptations. You will always be sober. God has placed me here. How could I do such wicked and sinful things? God has rewarded me. I was nothing. I had nothing in my life. I was so desperate to look for a job, and God blessed me. And how could I forget those things and let go of God's favor? I will keep my guard because I answer to God. Imagine with me, brothers and sisters, if all of us would always remember this. Just like Joseph. Again, I was imagining Joseph across the table. Joseph, please, if there's one thing that you want us to learn from this episode, what is your secret, Joseph? How did you overcome the testing of blessings and the testing of temptations? How, Joseph? I could imagine Joseph saying, I kept my guard. I did not lose my guard. In good times and in bad times. Napakadali pong makalimutan eh. Ibaba mo yung guard mo, yung shield of faith and everything, because everything is okay. But the enemy attacks us at all times. Maintain your guard because we're answerable to God. If that's true, since we are answerable to God, here's my challenge. Let us watch our life as Christ follower. Now that we are Christians, followers of Christ, wherever you are, in the office, at home, in the MRT, in the LRT, in the bus, are you traveling somewhere on holiday, going back to the Philippines? Nag-relax kasi tayo eh, no? Anyway, I'm not in the church, nag-relax eh. Patay. No. Keep your guard. Wherever we are. Because the enemy is there waiting for an opportune time. Jesus, we learned this from Jesus. When he was tempted for 40 days, after 40 days, Luke says, specifically, Satan withdrew for a while until an opportune time. But Jesus kept his guard because he's answerable to the Father. May God show mercy to us that we do not forget that we are being watched 24/7. So no matter what we're going through, don't have bitterness in your heart, resentments just like Joseph, because trials and testings, the God that we serve is able. Those are actually blessing in disguise for Joseph.
We pray for blessings. We pray for peace. Comfort for family. Protection while we sleep. We pray for healing. For prosperity. We pray for your mighty hand to ease our suffering, and all the while you hear each spoken need. Love is way too much to give us lesser things. 'Cause what if your blessings come through raindrops? What if your healing comes through tears? What if 1,000 sleepless nights are what it takes to know